attached to the Canadian First Army. And our mission was to open up the port of Antwerp so we could get supplies to the front line. And the Germans were trying to protect that, and then fighting a delaying action. Couldn't use the port till we got the Germans away from their artillery capability to shoot the ships.
This was in Holland.
In Holland.
You were in the 104th Infantry Division?
104th, I was with 415th Infantry.
The 104th was the division, and
there were three regiments, 413th, 14th, and 15th. I was with 415th.
okay, and
I was with L Company. It's a rifle company.
And
during the 2 years that we were in trainings, seemed like we'd never get overseas. I had every position in the company that's available. I was the weapons platoon leader of all three platoons, the rifle platoons, and I was executive CO and commanding officer at one time, but I went overseas as a weapons platoon leader. And we had 3 mortars and 4 machine guns.
how old were you when you went into the military?
I went in February of 41, so I would have been 23.
Were you drafted or did you enlist?
Drafted.
Were you married at that time?
No, I was single.
What?
And I first went to Texas to get my basic training. So after our training was done, they told us we were going to go to Fort Devens, Massachusetts. So they wanted some volunteers for KP. I was a private, so I volunteered for KP. And the kitchen was a boxcar with propane ranges inside of it. And when we cooked, to keep the soup and the food from flopping out of the cans, we cut up 2x4s. About 18 inches long, and we put those on top of the soup or whatever we're cooking to keep the food from sloughing out. But my job was, I was a potato peeler.
This was at Fort Devens?
No, this was in Texas.
Oh, Texas.
So I peeled potatoes all the way from Mineral Wells, Texas to Fort Devens, Massachusetts. And I sat on the floor of the boxcar with the door open, my feet hanging out, and I'd let the potato peels just fall out on the track. So I peeled potatoes all the way from Mineral Wells to Fort Devens. So we got up to Fort Devens, and there was a follow-up. As we always said in the Army, everything's always all fucked up. They didn't have any place for us. So we stayed on the train. They just turned the engine around, and they took us back to Fort Dix, New Jersey. And I was there then for, I guess, 3 months with the 12th Infantry. And part of the 12th Infantry walked the tomb of the unknown soldiers. But they only selected those soldiers who were regular Army and were bred and spit and polish, and so I never walked the tomb, but part of our outfit did.
So you had 2 years of training before you went over to Europe then?
Like what?
You had 2 years of training before you went overseas?
4.
4?
Yeah.
What year did you go into the military? 41?
I went in 41 and went overseas in 44. Well, about 3.5 years. I was a best trained soldier.
Where'd you spend the rest of the time when you were stateside?
Well, after about 3 months in Fort Dix, we went down to the Carolina maneuvers. And I drove a C&R car, command and reconnaissance, from Fort Dix down to Charlotte, North Carolina. Then we were assigned to the 4th Infantry Division. There were 3 regiments: the 12th, which I was in, the 8th, and the 22nd. And we were on maneuvers for, I don't know, maybe 4 months, 5 months. We didn't have any equipment. We marched and fought with mops, didn't have any guns, and we didn't have any tanks. We'd take one of our troop trucks and we'd paint across the side of it tank as we did our tactical maneuvers.
Where'd you go from there?
Hmm?
Where'd you go from there?
Then we, I guess December, we went back to Fort Gordon, Georgia. And we're part of the 4th Infantry Division. And I was in headquarters, 3rd Battalion. But all the time during maneuvers, we'd go around and write on trucks or anything we could write on. We would write O-H-I-O, Ohio.
That-a-way.
But that's not what it meant. It meant over the hill in October. Because they were going to keep us in beyond the year that we were initially drafted for. And we didn't like that. So we wrote O-H-I-O, over the hill in October.
How long were you at Fort Gordon then?
I was there until January.
Where'd you go next?
The battalion commander called me in one time and said, how'd you like to be a shave tail? That's a 2nd lieutenant. And I said, I don't know that I could cut it. And he said, I think you could. He says, here, fill this out. So I filled these papers out, and it was application for admission to the Officers Candidate School in Fort Benning, Georgia. So 2 weeks later, they tell me to get my clothes all packed in my foot locker, and here's your train tickets. You're going to go to Fort Benning, Georgia. So I went up there for Officer Candidate School.
How long did that take?
That was the longest 90 days I ever spent in my life.
Why do you say that?
Oh, because it was just, well, you know, after being a private, well, I was a staff sergeant by that time. And, well, you know, you kind of wanted to be an officer. And you had to, you trained all day or studied all day and did the same thing at night. Then you were evaluated every 3 weeks by one of the officers of the school. One of the officers was one of the Roosevelts, and I don't know which one. I think it was one of Teddy Roosevelt's sons.
Uh-huh.
He was a machine gun instructor. So one of my instructors told me, he says, you don't have the voice that we like to see in an officer. So he says, I'm going to give you a tip. Every time you can, you walk down to the motor pool where there's nobody around and just yell as loud as you can, Hong Kong, ding, dong, to lower the pitch of your voice. So that's what I did. Every free minute, I was down behind the motor pool, hollering, honk, kong, ding, dong. And it really lowered my voice. Scared me. It didn't sound like me. And we graduated in July. They give us $300 to buy our uniforms with.
So you were a second lieutenant then?
Second lieutenant.
Where'd you go then after?
And then we had 2 weeks leave. But we knew before we left school where our destination was, that we were to go to Camp Adair, Oregon.
Where in Oregon?
Camp Adair, near south of Portland, about 80 miles south of Portland, not too far from the coast.
Had you done much traveling before you got in the military?
No.
Had you ever left Ohio before you were drafted?
Yes, once. I'd been to Kentucky and Tennessee. We had an old boy in the lodge at Belleville, the Masonic Lodge. We always get up when they had wanting to talk, Rudy Gore. And he says, I've done a lot of traveling in my time. I've been all over Ohio and part of Indiana and Kentucky too. Never traveled.
So how long were you in at that?
We were in
Oregon.
In Oregon from August of '42 to March of May of '43.
What kind of training were you doing
That's where
there?
I was married in Oregon.
In Oregon, is that right?
Gene got on the train in Mansfield with the fiance of one of my buddies, Tom Donowski, from Long Island. Lives clear out on Montauk Point, still out there on Long Island, as far as you can go. I keep telling Tom, why don't you get off of that island, because one of these days it's going to sink. So Mary got on the train in New York, and she told Gene what kind of a hat she was wearing, and Gene told her what kind of a hat she'd have. And the two met on the train in Mansfield, Ohio, and headed on out to Oregon. Tom says they'll never come. And I didn't say that because I thought probably they would. So the day that they would have gotten in, Tom had a hot date that night.
Ah! Oh no!
So he sends me in to Salem or Corvallis? Salem, to meet him. And I went in to meet him. Never met Mary before. Of course, I'd met Gene. And we had only had maybe 3 dates in our life.
Really?
I met her in the 2nd grade.
Only 3 dates before you got married?
Yeah.
Oh, come on.
No. Well, maybe 4. Well,
Letters are
I'd go
wonderful
over and see. I would go over and see her, and she had a steady boyfriend, and I had a steady girlfriend. So we'd sit and talk about politics and religion, and I bet maybe three dates. So I meets him in Salem, Oregon, and Mary always says, "Where's Tom?" And I says, "He's on duty." So we didn't have any place to live, didn't have a car, and so the girls went and had to get the marriage license and do all of this stuff and make arrangements for the priest or preacher. Tom and Mary were Catholics. Gene and I were married in the Presbyterian Church at Corvallis. And Tom and Mary came and stood up for us. Best man and best woman.
Huh.
We couldn't stand up for them because we were Protestant.
All right.
So after we were married, we go to some friends of ours for kind of a reception. And then walks down to the bus station. We were going over to Newport, right on the ocean, Oregon. We had a 3-day honeymoon. And some boys from L Company come and started to let the air out of the bus tires when we were on the bus in Corvallis to go to Newport.
Just playing a prank?
Pardon?
Just playing a prank on you?
Yeah. I don't know who it was.
Well, did Gene stay in Oregon then after you got married?
Well, after we were in Newport, we came back to Salem again. Tom and I had to go back to the service, and the girls went and started to look for a place to live. Gene found a place way down on the Willamette River, out of Salem, about 8 miles.
I suppose.
And she rented it from a doctor's wife. The doctor was in the service. And we didn't have a car, so I had to go out and buy a car to get from the camp back to where we were on the Willamette River. So we were there for 4 months, I guess. Then we left on the Oregon maneuvers. Out around Bend, Oregon, we were there for 3 months. And from there, shipped out to Hyder, Arizona.
Did Gene go to
So
Arizona
they
too?
gave me my traveling orders. I had a wife, had a car, couldn't travel with the troops. So they gave me enough gas coupons from Salem, Oregon to Hyder, Arizona, which is southwest of Phoenix. And they gave me travel time of,
I don't remember.
I think, 8 days. So we head out and we drive clear back to Ohio in that little 39 Ford. And there was a boy in our company. What was his name? Eckert. Lived in Dayton, Ohio. Went along and helped with the driving. We drove practically non-stop from Salem, Oregon to Ohio. And we'd pull into a gas station and they'd always say, "You got enough coupons, soldier? You need some more coupons?" And we ended up in Ohio with more coupons than we started with. So while we were back there, a good friend of both of us wanted to know if we needed gasoline coupons or tires. Well, we needed tires. So we bought some tires. But then we traded cars. My brother's wife's father had died.
Jeez.
And we bought his 41 Dodge luxury liner. Beautiful car. And we headed back to Arizona, but we took my sister Betty with us.
Why was that? Was Bill in the...
Yeah, and so we get into Arizona, and they dropped us off dropped me off at the Hyder, Arizona, way out in the desert, halfway between Yuma and Phoenix. And they go back to Phoenix, and Jean has some shirt-tail relation back there that she got a room with, and she and Betty stayed there.
Where was Bill stationed?
Well, they weren't
This
married.
was before Bill.
Oh, before Bill.
Betty had just broken up a real serious affair.
This was planned to help her adjust her life to go back with us.
I see.
And I was one of the few people that had a car out there. And so one of the boys that rode back and forth with us from Phoenix to Hyder every weekend was a motor pool officer. So he would fill the car up down at the motor pool and put a jerry can, I don't know, one or two, in the back trunk.
So a gas
GI
can?
cans with gas.
Okay.
And then there would be, what, 3, 4, 5 of us
Whole car full.
would drive back to Phoenix. Weekends.
So how long were you stationed in
Well, we were
in
there,
Arizona?
and we were destined to go to Africa. And we were on dehydrated rations, no fresh food, everything frozen.
Just to get you ready to go to Africa,
Yeah.
huh?
And after maneuvers, why they all at once says you're going to go to Colorado Springs. So I call Gene and Betty, and I get on a bus and I meet them somewhere in Arizona on a bus. I don't know where it was. I don't know. Prescott or someplace. And we go on to Arizona.
Colorado Springs.
Colorado Springs. But I remember that first night we pulled in somewhere at a hotel and where
Prescott. I
Prescott,
think.
maybe. And I ordered fresh trout. They bring this trout down to me on a plate. Head, tail, eyes, everything. And Betty takes a look at it and she almost loses it.
Well, she'd ordered trout too.
Oh, I guess she did too, yeah.
Was that your first introduction to Colorado?
Yes. First time.
And how long were you in Colorado Springs then?
We were there from February until August.
What was the name of the base in Colorado Springs?
Pardon?
What was the name of the base in Colorado Springs?
Fort Carson. Still Camp Carson now.
No, it's Fort now.
Oh,
What's
it was Camp Carson then, it's Fort Carson now. Fort means it's a permanent fort. Camp is temporary.
Okay.
So we trained there for 4 months, and were notified that we were going to ship out. So Gene goes back to Ohio with my battalion commander's wife and their big Newfoundland dog.
Great.
Huh?
This is a Newfoundland.
Oh, big
Same size.
dog. Yeah.
And were you still a second lieutenant, or had you been promoted by this time?
I think I was a first lieutenant then,
And was this when you were shipped overseas?
shipped overseas.
And where were you shipped to initially? England?
When we shipped out, I don't know how I got word to Gene or the folks, but anyhow, we went through Crestline, Ohio at about 1 o'clock in the morning. And we stopped there to change engines. Those days they were steam engines. And Mother and Dad, you weren't going, were you? Why?
Yeah, why weren't you there?
They came and I talked to them out the window of the car. And I didn't know where we were going really. We just knew we were headed overseas. We went to Fort Dix, New Jersey. And from there shipped out on the USS George Washington.
Was that a big troop ship?
Yeah, we had a big troop ship. It had been a cruise liner before.
And
And we were the first division to land directly in France without being transported off of Utah Beach, or we landed in Cherbourg.
So you didn't go to England first?
Pardon?
You didn't go to England first?
No. Oh, we went straight to France.
You went straight from Fort Dix, New Jersey to France.
Mhm.
When did you get to France? Well, let me ask you first. How was the trip ship on the way over there? How many days did it take?
Well, of course, we had, I think we had everybody except the 413th Infantry, and we must have had close to 10,000 on the ship. And we went in a convoy. I don't know what the other ships were, but I think our convoy probably made up of 30 ships as we crossed.
This was in June of '44.
This would have been in August of '44.
August. Okay.
And I caught night duty as an observer in the bow of the ship. I think I had a 3-hour shift every night. Took us 13 days to cross.
You say you were an observer. What were you watching for?
Submarines. And I remember the first night I was out there, they gave us no instructions. And to me, a submarine is something that floats underwater with a pipe sticking out from the top. So, after on duty for an hour of looking, didn't see anything, why I spied something cut in the water out in front of us. I could see the waves, or the water break. So I followed my instructions and called one of the officers on the ship. He came up and took a look at it, and he said, that's I forget what he called it, something the ship in front of us drags way behind it, so that our ship didn't run into it.
Okay.
At night. It just cut the water. Well, nobody told me that. To me, it was a submarine.
Did you get sick on the way over?
First day.
First day?
First morning.
Was it pretty choppy?
Went down to the dining room, and we, being an officer, we had a sit-down dining room. We didn't have to walk through a mess line, and we had menus to order from. So I always like to order something different, so I ordered poached cod. And our crew was British. So they brought this plate in with hot milk and a piece of fish sitting in the center of it. So I left in a hurry. That's the only time I got sick.
And that you went to Cherbourg.
And when we landed then, well, of course, Patton was making great strides across France and almost into Germany. And the Germans were in massive retreat, and we thought the war was going to be over. So our first assignment, we bivouacked on the side of a hill in pup tents.
This is on the beach, or is it inland a ways?
Well, we were back maybe 3 miles from the beach. So our first assignment was we had to post guards on Liberty ships as they were unloading supplies for the Army, and to prevent the stevedores, colored boys, from breaking the packages open and selling them on the black market. That included butter and cigarettes and whiskey, and
Was that a big problem, was it?
yes, it was a big problem. And I had to post my platoon, weapons platoon. I had to post them at night at 9 o'clock and take them off at 1. They were on for 4 hours. And these Liberty ships were anchored out off of the beach, or off of Cherbourg. Couldn't get in because the Germans had sunk so many ships. They were anchored out, well, maybe a mile, and we went out in an Army duck, a little combination truck and rowboat. And we pull up to these Liberty ships, not a very big ship, but at night they looked awful big. And over the side hung an iron ladder. So you're on, and everything was blackout because the Germans still had Air Force capability. So I'd get up on the end of this little boat, feeling around, can't see anything until I feel a ladder, and then I grab it. And either the ship went up or our boat went down, but there I am hanging on that ladder till I get my feet in place. So I crawl up the ladder with my 6 men after me and go up and relieve the other 6 men, and then start back down the ladder in the dark with the boat up and down with the swells, and just keep walking until your little boat, or we call them Army ducks, come up and hit you in the feet or in the butt real hard. You got off. That was my worst experience in the Army.
Is that right?
Right there.
Now, by the time you got to France, were you still a first lieutenant, or were you a captain by that point?
First lieutenant.
First lieutenant.
And we did that for maybe 3 weeks. Posted guard every night. And at that time, the Army gave us our cigarettes. And being an officer, I got a bottle of whiskey every 10 days, 2 weeks, probably 2 weeks. And we soon learned that that we could trade the whiskey to the French for eggs and bread. We did that.
Is that what you did then?
Pardon?
Is that what you did?
Yeah. Then we got word we were going to go to Holland. So we went up, we left there and left Cherbourg on what we call the 40 and 8.
What was that?
That was 40 men or 8 horses in a boxcar. 40 or 8. And
So you went there by railroad? By train?
They were narrow gauge. Just plain old boxcars with straw in them. And I think our trip to, I don't know I forget anymore where we got out in Belgium. But we were 4 days going up in these 40 and 8.
This would have been in late August or early September?
This would have been in late September.
Late September.
Maybe early October.
Okay.
Maybe late September. So we get out and
4 days to get there by train.
Yeah.
To Belgium.
Yeah. Well, of course, we had bombed all the railroads, and we had to wait till they fixed rail lines, and we had to detour, and it was 4 days.
Now Belgium's different than Holland, though, right?
Pardon?
Belgium's different than Holland.
Yes.
Okay, so you went to Belgium first.
Yeah.
What'd you do in Belgium?
Well, we got off the train and marched across the border, and we were assigned to the 1st Canadian Army.
So you marched across the border into Holland.
And the next morning we started to move out, headed down this little asphalt trail. I didn't really call it a road. I didn't think it was big enough for cars. And we were approaching the town of, we marched most of the afternoon. We were approaching the town of Atty in Holland. And all at once somebody slammed the door in my face. It's just like you walked up to somebody's house and you wanted to go in, and they greeted you, but they just slammed the door in your face. And then somebody started to holler 88s. Those were the German artillery on tanks. And they were shooting these 88s at us.
From tanks.
So I gave the command, or the captain gave the command, everybody off of the road, and we got off to the side of the road, and we started to dig in, because we were under fire, under artillery fire. And so everybody for himself. And I dug a pretty good hole, long, maybe 12 inches deep, just so you can get under.
You dug that with a little spade you carried?
So then after I had finished that, I thought, hey, I've got a platoon to take care of. So I start looking around for my two-way radio and my rifle. I can't find them. I covered them up with dirt. So I got that corrected, and the next thing I hear is a bell ringing. And I look around, I don't see any church or anything, but I saw this cow walking down the asphalt road toward us. And it was this cow had a bell on it. And a few minutes later, this cow steps on a mine in the road. And this cow just goes up in the air about 8 feet to flipping over. And come down. That was my first baptism of fire. So we were there, we stayed there really until after dark. And then we went off to the sides of the fields. And then sugar beet fields. So the Germans then opened the dikes on us, and the water come in, and we spend the night in, maybe knee deep, hip deep of water in these fields.
Standing up all night?
Yeah. Well, you crawl up on the side, but if you crawl up on the side of the dikes to get out, or they'd start shooting machine gun fire at you.
And they had the tanks there too. You said the German.
The 88s didn't bother us after that. It was just the mortar fire from the Germans. Then later on that night, there was a lumber yard in Knockmall. It caught on fire, I expect from our return fire. And that thing burned all night. That was, we were within 2 football fields, 200 yards of this big fire of this lumber yard. So the next morning, everything looked better. We didn't seem to be having much enemy fire. And chow trucks come up and fed us. And we started to regroup to move on through the town. And my company commander, Captain Hallahan, said, "We're getting fire from our rear. Put your machine guns on this building." He told me which one it was. "And put some tracer ammunition in it to set it on fire." Tracer ammunition is a magnesium coated bullet every 5th bullet. So whatever it hits, it starts, if you hit the object, it starts it on fire. So in the meantime, I start down this hedgerow toward the building with my machine guns clipping off the roof, and the smoke falling out, and I get down at the ends of this hedgerow in front of the building, and it was going to lop a grenade through, and the door opens. And out walks Father Quinn with his helmet over his, he's the chaplain, over his arm. Oh, Danowski was with me too. And Father Quinn says, Danowski, what's going on out here? And we didn't know it, but that was the battalion aid station. They had our wounded people in this building. And here, my machine guns had got it set on fire.
Huh.
But there was a German sniper on the second floor.
How often did you have to? Let me ask you this: on those things you just described, it, did you win one of your awards for that action?
No, that was 2 weeks, 3 weeks later in Holland. But a lot had happened between that time and
What can you just tell us briefly what happened in between then?
well, you know, the Germans just fought a delaying action and they were outgunned. We had more forces, or what they call today assets, than the Germans had. They just fought this delaying action to the rear. And a couple of weeks later, we approached the town of Udenbach. I don't remember much about it other than the big cathedral that they had in Udenbach, the Catholic cathedral. And it was right, and the Maas River was Udenbach was about 3 miles from the Maas River. And we were to make a crossing of the Maas River, but the mission given to the 3rd Battalion of the 415th was to capture the bridge across the Maas River before the Germans blew it up, so that we could get the rest of the division across. And I was assigned the mission of taking the weapons platoon as the point of the battalion. We were clear out in front to detect any hostile fire or reconnaissance. And it was night. It was about 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, I suppose. Couldn't see much. We were very quiet walking along. As we approached the bridge, all at once we heard this thump, 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 thump coming down around us, and the Germans blew the bridge up. And we took off to the side of the road for cover, and these big chunks of concrete falling all around you. So we failed in our mission to capture the bridge. The Germans blew it up before we got there.
Huh.
So we received orders to retreat back to Udenbach, and my weapons platoon was given the mission of protecting the rear of the retreat. So the rest of the battalion take off, and we stayed with limited firefight, and then we'd move back a little bit. And as we did that, of course, we came across wounded men blown to pieces. And so we get back into Udenbach that night, and Captain Hallahan, our company commander, went up to a Dutch house for the CP. He was knocking on the door, and nobody would come, so he pulls out his .45 pistol, and puts it up to the lock, was just going to blow the lock to pieces on the door. And the door opens. And here is a Dutchman and his wife. Wasn't long till we realized that they were friendly. They thought we were Germans.
Oh.
Of course, they just fell all over us. So I couldn't help but think about all these guys I saw back along our path of retreating that were shot. So I have since read that that people who are in a state of shock, and I guess I was in a state of shock when they blew this bridge up. We were within maybe 100 feet, 150 feet of this bridge when they blew it up with dynamite.
Made a lot of noise and.
I remember more concussion than I do noise. I remember the noise of all this concrete falling around me. I don't know why I didn't get hit, but I didn't. So after Hallahan got these people invited us into their house to set up their CP, I start back along the path that we had retreated from. And I think I did that because I was in a state of shock. And when you're in a state of shock, you don't make very good decisions. And I found several people, and I radioed back first aid station for stretchers to come forward, and a couple of them I gave morphine shots to. That's when I got my Silver Star. It was not heroism. I was just in a state of shock doing a dumb thing. So I come back to the headquarters then that night, and I suppose I'm talking about a time lapse of an hour. And the lady, the Dutch lady, was taking up donations of K rations. They were chocolate bars. I don't know, almost pure chocolate. And she made I don't know how many gallons of hot chocolate for our company.
Huh. And what time of year was this?
This would have been in probably October, about Halloween.
Okay.
Last of October. Then the next morning, I didn't know this. I just did what any soldier would do. I didn't know I had done anything heroic until I was transferred out of L Company. Maybe 60 days later.
Huh.
I got my star. I didn't know that. But the next morning, the old Dutchman motioned to me, and I went over, and he went this way for me to follow him into the barn. The barn was attached to the house. All of them are done that way in Holland. House and barn right next together, attached. So we go into the barn, and he picks up the pitchfork. And I think there's a German hiding in there. We can't communicate. So he starts to pull this straw away, very cautiously. And then I could see what he was uncovering. It was a 1941 Chevrolet two-door that he hid from the Germans.
Is that right?
Yeah. Oh, he's so proud of that.
What was he showing you for? Just to show it off?
Huh?
Was he just wanting to show it off to you?
Yeah. So, yeah.
He was proud of it.
Oh, yeah. I thought he was going to uncover a German, but he had covered that up and hid it from the Germans.
Huh. You had told me when we were together last time that at some point you served as an aide for somebody that later became.
After the war.
Oh, this is after the war.
After the war, I went back to. I was transferred out of L Company into regimental headquarters as assistant operations officer.
Okay. Well, I don't want to get you out of order then.
Huh?
We'll talk about that later. I don't want to get you out of order.
Well, and I didn't have any. I never saw an MOS, military occupation specialty order, or
What happened after that Silver Star? Then what where were you after that, and what happened?
was assistant S3 all the way through to regimental headquarters. But I was more frightened back at regimental headquarters than I was when I was in the front line. Regimental headquarters was back, about a good safe half mile from the front line troops.
When were you transferred to regimental headquarters?
When?
Yeah, but was it in November? Or?
About November 15th.
Okay.
And it was strictly operations, map work, and did some liaison. Had to make trips back to division or up to company headquarters to give battle orders. But I got dugout fever. You're back there and away from the front lines, and you get the feeling of how lucky you are. Then somebody hands you an order, and you get in the Jeep with a driver and head up to the front lines with people shooting at you.
And were you a captain by this point?
I got my notice of the award of the Silver Star in the same week that I made captain.
Okay.
And I only made captain not because I did anything heroic, but because the table of organizations called for the assistant operations officer to be the rank of captain.
How'd you get your Bronze Star?
Oh, I don't know. I suppose I've got 3 or 4 Bronze Stars. And I never really saw the orders. So I don't know.
What were the circumstances where you got the Purple Heart?
That would have been the it would have been in let's see, it was a lot more. I can't think of the time. Where the Germans had a artillery spotter in the tower of a Lutheran church. I've got a picture of it on the bulletin board down in Casa Grande. He was a spotter up there and would direct artillery fire on us as we were approaching the town.
Was it still in Holland?
Holland.
Okay.
Yeah. And that was the same time that our battalion commander was killed, Major Russey. And John Evans, wasn't it? Major Evans, both of them, second time.
So even though you were in the regimental headquarters, you were back and
No,
forth.
I was still in L Company.
Oh, you were still in L Company
Oh,
then.
yeah, I was still in L Company.
Okay.
And I was crawling through some fortifications, barbed wire, and cut my hand on barbed wire trying to get underneath it to go through. Didn't think anything about it, and a couple of days later I had infection in it. So I only got the Purple Heart. I went back to the aid station. They treated me, made a record of it. So when the war was over, they started. They gave you points. The people with the most points got to go home first. The points were how many days have you been in the service? You got so many points for that. How many days have you been under fire or battle? You got so many points for that. You got so many points for a Silver Star. So I thought, hey, I was in the aid station for this wound I got on the, crawling under barbed wire. So I went to the major, and he said, sure, you can have a Purple Heart. So 2 days later, I'm out of the Army, because it gave me my points.
When was it you got out of the Army then? Was it?
When?
Yeah, was it after VE Day?
Well, no. Well, after the war was over in Europe, I was on the advance party and came back in July. Was I home for 30 days?
I think so.
30 days.
Nice long leave.
July of 45.
Yeah. And I knew where we were going. We were going to San Luis Obispo, near San Francisco, California. So when my time was up, I got on the train and went back to Fort Dix, New Jersey. 2 days later, I come right back through Mansfield, Ohio, on my way to San Luis Obispo. We get down to El Paso, Texas, and they take our car and put it on a siding. This was not a troop train. This was just a military car attached to a passenger train. And we were on that siding for, I don't know, 2 days. We had government food orders. We'd go eat, and the government paid for it. I think there were 10 or 12 of us on this one troop car.
Huh.
Finally, they hooked on and took us into San Luis Obispo. And so there, we kind of regrouped and filled out our ranks with replacements, because we were heading for the Pacific, somewhere we didn't know. We have since learned that we were going to Australia, and from there on would have been in not the attacking force, but the reserve force for the invasion of Japan. And one morning I picked up the paper and I see it says U-235. And I remember right away when I had first heard of that, back in the bank in Lexington, 5 years before. We had a guy that returned to Lexington to retire, Harry F. Smith. He was an engineer, and he worked for C.F. Kettering at Delco in Dayton. And I remember Harry coming into the bank and talking to my boss about U-235, and he said one day a teaspoonful of that will drive a battleship around the world.
Huh.
So I put 2 and 2 together on the atomic bomb. And about 2 weeks later, I was out.
So you were in Texas when you were discharged?
No, I was in San Luis Obispo when I was discharged.
California.
California.
Okay.
So I took a bus down to Los Angeles, I guess, and got on a plane and flew home. Flew into Columbus.
Well,
Gene and Papa were there to meet me.
did you write a lot of letters to Jean or to your folks when you were in the service?
Yes, and she's got every damn one of them.
Does she really?
Yeah.
Whatever happened to the letters that you wrote to your folks? Did they ever get saved?
They kept them.
Huh?
I think they kept them all.
Did they?
What has ever happened to them? Do we know?
I think we got some of them
Is that right?
with ours.
Tell me about the time where I think it was Christmas where you got Dick into an officers club.
We were stationed along the Ora River, right across from Durham. And
Was this when you were in Holland or
no, this was in Germany.
in Germany?
And I was back with regiment then. And they wanted one person from each regiment to go back to a school for a new type of artillery fuse. So I was selected from our regiment to go back, and
Where was the school at?
it was in Paris,
Okay.
and I don't know how many, there were quite a bunch of us, I'd say 200-300 of us. And it was called Posit Ammunition. And it was so secret that when we fired ammunition after that, and if the observer noticed that it did not explode, we had to send a patrol out to retrieve that. So I had to go back to understand the intricacies of this. Before the Posit fuse ammunition, artillery observers and anti-aircraft would have to guess what they wanted the airburst to be. An artillery shell has a fuse on it, and we could set that fuse by turning a dial on for the burst to be 100 feet, 200 feet off the ground. And it was just guesswork, really. But the Posit fuse had a radar in the end of the fuse, so that you could decide if you want it to be 100 feet. You just go to number so and so, and the strength of that radar coming back would detonate the fuse, and would detonate the shell. And air bursts are far more effective than ground bursts. Air burst shoves the shrapnel down. Ground burst shoves the shrapnel up. So it was the Posit ammunition that won the air battle of Britain by using Posit ammunition in anti-aircraft shells. So that's what I was back there for. And I got in touch with Dick. First night I checked in at the hotel, Mickey Rooney was at the desk clerk at the hotel where I stayed.
Mickey Rooney was.
Hmm?
Mickey Rooney was.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Huh.
And so I got in touch with Dick, and he came in then. He was stationed outside of Paris. I don't know where or how far, I forget. But I think I only saw Dick the one time, maybe twice. But I wanted to go to the officers' club. We didn't know where to go, where to eat or anything, but I knew that we'd be taken care of at the officers' club. So Dick was gun shy to go in as a corporal to the officers' club. So I take my field jacket off with the captain's bars, and I take my hat off, and I got another hat I can wear, and Dick and I walk in. There's two captains to the officers' club. Spent the I got a nice meal there that night.
Oh, was that Christmas time or a little before Christmas time?
This would have been about the 17th, 18th of December,
Okay.
just before Christmas.
I guess the stories I've heard are that
Pardon?
I guess what I've heard is you or Dick wrote a letter to your folks telling them that you'd
Yes.
had dinner together.
I think Dick wrote the letter. I didn't. Yeah.
And I think maybe I've heard that Gong Gong and Papa read that letter to everyone at
Yeah.
Christmas.
I read it at the Christmas party. Then.
Okay.
But this was during the Battle of the Bulge. And when I got ready to, when our school was over, we headed back, and we had some difficulty getting back. We knew that the Germans had penetrated the American lines, but we didn't know about all the sabotage that they had done, that they were dressed as MPs, American MPs, and had changed all the road signs around them.
Did you ever have a camera with you when you were over there, taking any pictures or anything?
Only when I was in basic training. I had one of the little giveaway cameras that Kodak gave us. That's all. I had gotten a hold of a Leica camera when I was with L Company in the front lines. Pilfered it, I guess you'd say. And when I went back to regiment, one of my senior officers, who was responsible for bringing me back out of the front lines to the safety of regimental headquarters, decided that he wanted that as a consolation prize, my Leica.
Is that right?
I had a Leica and a German Luger.
Did he get them both?
I don't know what happened to my German Luger. He wanted the Leica.
Did you ever have any leap where you were able to do any sightseeing over there or anything like that?
No, not really. Oh, you know, I saw a lot of things, but I didn't call it sightseeing then. I guess because I was not a very good history student in high school. And I always regretted that I didn't know more about Europe and all its historical significance.
Well, while you were over there, you pretty much camping outside all the time you were over there.
When I was in the front lines, L Company, in Holland, it was outside all the time. And once we got back into Germany, it was houses. But I was not under fire or combatant in Germany at all.
Now, I think you told me that at some point you were serving as an aide for someone that later became a politician in New York.
Oh, Governor Carey.
Governor Carey.
He was my. He was S3. I was assistant S3. Hugh Carey.
So you worked under him.
Yeah. And he was a capable soldier. I remember after we crossed the Ora River, I'm in regiment then, and we stayed on the one side of the Eschweiler side of the Ora River. Oh, we were there for a month, maybe 6 weeks. And we were in we had our regimental headquarters in a bomb shelter that the Germans had put up. very sturdy fortification back into the side of a hill. And Colonel Cochran was there. Carey was there. I was there. I don't think there was more than 6 of us. We weren't too far from the front line, but we had all this fortification. And all through the war, after I went back to regiment, when things got tough, Colonel Cochran, the regimental commander, would say, "Snyder, get the cards." And we'd play gin rummy. That's the way he'd unwind. He took lots of money from me. And he just delighted in doing that. So one night, instead of "Snyder, get the cards," was "Snyder, get your gun." And we're in a area a little bigger than this, with bunks. And we had a heating stove out near the end of the entrance. One like you asked about over here, where that heating shell was, or that ring.
Right.
And so I start out. We got a guard out in front. He's outside. And I start out through the narrow concrete area to the front button to the stove, and I could see what the problem was. The fire extinguisher hanging above the stove got too hot, and the safety valve popped off, and it takes off, and it starts to fill all of our dugout with the colonel thought we were being gassed. "Snyder, get your gun." So when we finally crossed the Ora River then, and through Duran, and we just made a straight shot into Cologne. And the 3rd Armored had really taken Cologne. So one morning, Hugh Carey says, "Dave, why don't you go in and get the Jeep and see if you can't bring home something to drink?" So I inquired around and found where the wine cellars were. And we drove down off of the street into this long incline down underneath to the wine cellars. And I can remember down there, the lights, no electricity. We had the Jeep lights on. And there was a firefight down there between the Germans and 3rd Armored, apparently. Because I'm leaning over the side of the Jeep, looking down at the Jeep running through wine that deep down in the cellar, just seeing it splashing off to the side. Never will forget that.
Huh.
But I did find, I brought back a case of cognac and a case of something else from that wine cellar.
What country were you in when the war ended over there?
Pardon?
Were you in Germany when the war ended, or in?
Oh yeah. We had advanced as far as Leipzig, and they made us then retreat back to Halle. The Roosevelt and Churchill and Stalin had agreed on a line of which the Russians would not penetrate, or we would not penetrate. And so we had to back up to about 20-some miles to Halle. That's where I was when the war ended.
So you were over there.
I didn't meet any Russians.
You were over there for about a month after the war ended, a month and a half. So you came back in July.
Well, we had a nice CP, I had never seen a home in the States that was nice as the one we commandeered for our CP, regimental headquarters. And it was a nice dining room, and I guess the headquarters company cooked the meal, and then the Germans served it for us. We had tablecloth, and the colonel was very formal during those periods. He'd sit at the end of the table, and his staff would sit around the table, and that went on for, I expect, 2 weeks before I got my orders to come back on the advance party. And we'd have our happy hour with the cognac, and we had lots to drink, and we had to stop at a certain time so that we'd be in good shape when we appeared at the colonel's table.
When you were over there, how did the people in Holland and Germany how did they react to the the U.S. or the Allied soldiers?
We were very docile. One of the things I always had to do when I was back in the regiment was to go ahead and select the next command post location, and would pick out some place that was centrally located within the regiment, and good lines of communication, highway, and when we evacuated the people, they seemed to understand, and no trouble.
Did you ever have to deal with the German prisoners?
Yes, but only when I was with L Company.
Did you ever see any of these concentration camps or anything like that over there?
Yes, we liberated the Nordhausen concentration camp. Our regiment did, not me, but I went up. The same day the frontline troops were up there, and before military government came in, well, we kind of had to take command to give orders. Military government was a group that came in after we moved through when they took over the towns and tried to put some infrastructure and stability. But I remember then that someone, I don't know whether they were with 3rd Armored or with our regiment, made stretchers out of 2x4s with military overcoats. Put the 2x4 through the armholes and to take those Jewish or those inmates that still showed some sign of life, to evacuate them from this building.
Huh.
And I went into the building, and I can still see it was institutional style, concrete stairways that go up to the 2nd floor, and I can still see the inmates where they died right on the stair step. And we brought in bulldozers and dug long trenches, and had the German civilians who were very indignant. Oh, we didn't know this. We're not part of this. But we made them do this, made them carry the corpses out of the buildings to the trenches that the bulldozers had dug. I don't know how many there were in Nordhausen. Hundreds that I saw dead.
Huh.
And some that just had little life in them. I'm sure they never made it.
Have you ever gone back over to Europe after the war to?
No.
seen any of the places where you
And
were when you were?
I never want to watch a military picture, movie, or TV that has violence in it. I haven't seen Saving Private Ryan, and I did watch one here last week called The Big Red One, First Division, but it wasn't so much about violence and fighting as it was about politics and what they've done ever since their existence, the First Division. And our division commander, Terry Allen, was at one time commander of the First Division. He was commander of the First Division when they landed on D-Day. And I watched it because I was always curious as to why he left the Magic First and went to a new division, 104th.
Huh. Did you come home before Dick or after Dick?
Probably
Cold, November. So we pulled off the side of the road for a lunch break. And I always put my K rations on the engine block, the motor, to get warm. I'll punch a little hole in them so they wouldn't blow up. I learned that once. And so they wanted a fire, and it was raining. They gathered some wood, and so I grabbed a GI can, 5 gallons of gasoline off the Jeep, and run up to the fire and took the cap off and doused the fire. Doused the wet wood. And put the cap back on, but apparently didn't get it on tight enough. And I started back to the Jeep, and I'm dragging gasoline, losing gasoline, and somebody throws a match on the fire. And the fire just followed along the road, along the ground there, till I put the can up on the Jeep. Somebody hollered at me. Burnt the Jeep up.
Huh.
your K rations.
Yes.
My K rations too. Yeah, I
Your K
forgot about
rations
that.
too. Huh.
Experience. Absolutely. No way. If you got excited bouncing around in that dumb Jeep a little while ago, no way. Of all the things that happened and we saw, this Donowski, the boy that stood up for us, was out on Long Island. He and I were always in the same company until I was transferred out. And whenever he would bed down at night, he'd always get his shovel out and dig a little hole. He'd call him his butthole for to roll his sleeping bag out on. So this was in Oregon during the Bend maneuvers. And one night he and a bunch of guys went into Bend to talk about beer. So we get the Jeep and the trailer, and we come up to where his shelter half was, leaning, just half of it, shelter half, where he had his bed made. And we started to dig, and we dug a hole about 4 feet deep, about as long as the sleeping bag, and then covered over with pine boughs and put his sleeping bag on it. We put the dirt in the Jeep and hauled it away. So he comes in about 1, 2 o'clock in the morning and sets down on his sleeping bag to take his shoes off and falls 4 feet into this hole. And he wasn't quite sober. So he starts to holler, "Snyder, God damn it, where are you, Snyder?" And he walks all over till he finds where I am. and he grabs my sleeping bag, the end of it, and just starts to drag me all over the campground, just a hollering. So from ever since then, I've always called him Butthole. To this day, I call him Butthole.